When she says you and me against the world, it sounds okay. We live in the condo for 7 years, and then Marilyn marries a bankrupt, both financially and it turns out morally, Austrian Archduke. When she introduces him to me, she says, his family used to rule Europe, so be nice. Helen Reddy is replaced by Barry Manilow, ready to take a chance again, which she sings in her Palomino-colored Oldsmobile Cutlass. Right away, I dislike this man. I tell my mom not to trust him. Something just feels weird about him. Maybe it's the way he speaks with his foreign accent or dresses in outdated and boldly colored 70s clothes. A yellow lace shirt bought for him by his now deceased second wife. Or maybe it's the way he coos to my mother while asking her to put dinner on her credit cards instead of his. She accuses me of being jealous and then urges me to have a relationship with him. A year after their first meeting and after the death of my father, she marries the Archduke and we move into his house in Libertyville, Illinois, an area not particularly known for bankrupt Eurotrash or little Jewish girls. I'm 10 years old. The fog is so thick the night we drive from the Detroit suburbs to Libertyville that I wonder, does my mom know where she's going? She's like a paragraph more. Do you want, can I, yeah? Okay. After 2 years of living in the Archduke's house, which my mom likes to call the embassy, she calls him the Ayatollah and she calls us the hostages. We move again to the North Shore suburbs, an area made famous by John Hughes in such 80s classics as 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. The choice is made by Marilyn, who wants to live near other Jews, and I'm thrilled, because at this point, all I really want out of life is to be cast in a John Hughes movie. I even have an agent and a stage name. Marilyn is hoping that getting out of the Libertyville house, which her husband built with his dead second wife, whom my mother has taken to calling Rebecca after the Daphne du Maurier thriller, will alter the tenor of her marriage. She is an optimist. First, we live in an apartment complex built around a golf course, and a year later we moved to a townhouse near a Dairy Queen. Although I get auditions, even a callback or two, no teen movies are being made starring or even featuring Brooke Allison. When I'm 16, Marilyn and the Archduke contemplate a move to Florida, where the Archduke has started a business and an extracurricular relationship. This plan is mercifully put to rest by my mom's health troubles. She needs to be near her family in Detroit and her doctors in Chicago. And then when I'm 18, I leave for New York City forever. So moving wasn't anything new.
There's tons of seats in the front row if you guys standing back there want to sit. There's lots of front row seats.
Hi guys.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay, so my book is called Love or Something Like It. It was published about a year ago. And it was published because I published a short story in a literary magazine and I got calls from agents based on it. So that short story ended up being a chapter in the novel. So I'm just going to read a really brief excerpt from that chapter that was a short story. The story of the novel is a woman who moves from the East Coast to the West Coast, kind of Hollywood, and she quickly gets married and then sort of quickly the marriage starts to unravel. And so it's kind of a story of a broken heart and starting over, hence the cover. It's not a very subtle cover. And so this part takes place when her marriage is just starting to unravel and her job is sort of going downhill as well. It was summer in LA and I had just gotten married and there was a pit bull roaming the halls at my office. Hollywood was hazy and slow and Toby was out of work and the pit bull had a white coat splotched with deviant brown shapes that made me think of heart disease. The TV show where I worked was lawless. People did what they wanted and said what they wanted. Toby was lying on the couch all day in our apartment with the windows open and the fire trucks roaring past and the noise and the heat and the pot he was smoking making him never want to get up. The pit bull was unleashed and strong and it slinked by my door several times a day as I proofed scripts in my tiny office. When it came too close, I leaned across my desk, shut the door, and locked it. The dog, whose name was Attila, had a muscular body, a square face and jaw, and empty, flat button eyes like a doll's. It belonged to our show's executive producer, RJ, who had rescued it from a shelter. I went to this place in the valley, he told a group of us in the hallway one day, and there was Attila, and I said, "What the fuck is that thing?" And they said, "This dog has been abused by humans, and this dog needs to get trust back in its life." And I said, okay, man, and that was it. It just felt right, and I'm so sick of second-guessing myself. RJ, my new boss, was tall and thickly, darkly handsome. He wore a gold chain and a baseball cap and sunglasses even inside. He had come up with the idea for the show and written and directed the pilot, and so he was, in the straightforward shorthand of Hollywood, the showrunner, meaning, as it sounds, that he ran the show. He was 40-ish and never married, and he gave off a serious vibe of cocky Hollywood asshole. I tried to stay out of his way. RJ's assistant, Misty, was 22 and wore beach clothes to the office. She was constantly trying to recover from him yelling at her. You could walk into her office at almost any time of day and she'd be crying, another assistant bent over her, murmuring sympathy and counsel. I just want to make this dog trust someone again, RJ said to us in the hallway. If I do that, I think I'll be good about myself. I think I'll feel good about myself. Absolutely no one was nice to me at my office, and when sometimes Misty and the other assistants threw Attila its big stuffed bone down toward my end of the hall, it would come racing down the rug, ravenous and reckless. I would close my door and lock it, and they would yell sorry because they knew I was afraid, but when I opened the door afterward, they would be standing there giggling, their hands pressed over their mouths. Soon the dog started to stalk me. It sought me out, leaving the stuffed bone untouched, glowering at me as it passed my door, threatening me with its unseeing eyes. It was male, I felt sure, though I never got close enough to look between its legs. No one ever called it he or she, they always said Attila. Oh, Attila, how you doing? Or Attila needs a new toy. Doesn't Attila need a new toy? RJ had asked us to call the dog Attila to its face as often as possible because a dog psychologist had told him that a new name would help the dog settle into its new life and take on a new personality. Attila had had another name when it had lived on the streets and belonged to a gang before it was rescued by RJ. The dog had once been known as DeAndre, and it had been a fighter in the backyards of South Central. It had scars and wounds that would never go away. It had even fought and killed a dog that had turned out to be its own father, was what people said. Despite this, no one else in the office seemed to be afraid of Attila. If nothing else, it seemed they could love a dog that might one day end up ripping out their throats. They went right up to it and petted it, and when their children visited the set, they let them pet it too. But I was afraid. I never did anything about it, though. I didn't want to complain. I was only the writer's assistant, one step up from intern, and I had only been working there since Toby and I had returned from our honeymoon in Paris. It was my first job in Hollywood, and I didn't want to mess it up. I was 30 years old and from a good family back east. I had gone to boarding school and backpacked around Europe and started and ended 2 perfectly decent careers in New York. I was giving myself one last chance at starting over. My job now was to swallow my pride and get coffee and take notes and do whatever the writers said. Can you bring this pen to my office? One of them asked me on my second day. She was lounging in the writer's room reading the newspaper, and she handed the pen to me without looking up. I don't know what she meant, but I did it. I carried it to her office several doors down, and I laid it on her desk, and I felt I had passed a kind of test.